Hello, my name's Elijah Wells, and today's review is Robert Eggers' new movie, Nosferatu. The movie follows Thomas Hunter being betrayed by Nicholas Hoult, who plays a estate agent who has a very fateful meeting with Count Ulok, who is Nosferatu in the movie, played by Bill Skarsgård. And while he was away for several days and weeks on end, meeting up with Nosferatu and being away in a foreign country, his wife, Anna Hunter, being portrayed by Lily Rose Depp, it becomes more and more disturbed in her visions, but particularly in the nighttime, where she gets more and more disturbing visions of Nosferatu, to the point she ultimately gets possessed. Robert Eggers is considered one of the best horror directors to emerge out of the 2010s, particularly with his debut film The Witch, which garnered him a lot of praise and, of course, huge box office receipts. Then 4 years later, in 2019, he really ramped things up a notch with the movie The Lighthouse with Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson, and garnered an Oscar nomination for its cinematography, and pretty much somewhat cemented his name in horror lore. Even though he pivoted a little bit more into more action territory with The Northman, although despite the critical acclaim the movie got, the movie unfortunately disappointed in the box office. But however, with his brand new movie Nosferatu, he's essentially remaking what's also considered one of the most iconic horror icons of the early horror cinema, with its first film coming out in the 1920s. Then later was remade in a movie at some point in the 1970s with director Werner Herzog and also starring the very controversial actor Klaus Kinski. But already off the bat from his previous movies, the one thing that really sold a lot of Robert Eggers films to the mainstream audience is that he's really good at really setting the vibe of the film. Like, the atmosphere of this film is just oozing with how unpleasantly creepy and almost somewhat repulsive it is. Like, I remember watching a clip of Conan O'Brien praising The Witch, which is there was a video down on the description where he does talk a lot about it, where he particularly talks, where Conan O'Brien did talk about a simple shot of the trees just shaking in the winds and how that just really unsettled him. Like, a lot of that movie in Nosferatu, just that entire vibe, even from all the way from the opening scene where Ellen gets possessed from Nosferatu at a very early age, and how really uncomfortable and unsettling it is, even down to the more very dreary and very somewhat drab set decoration and art design of this movie, where it's usually a palette of largely greys, which again feels very cold and very unwelcoming, which again does accomplish the movie's really grim atmosphere. With the exception of his debut film The Witch, all of his films are shot on 35mm film, which does show on Nosferatu, which even though why film is such a well used and well versed thing in cinematography, as it does burst the colours a lot more easily, and it captures lighting a lot more better as opposed to like digital cameras. But for the film's cinematography, which would you say does just fuels how really uncomfortable and very jarring the vibe of the film is, but it's also very beautiful as well, particularly when we go around the city where most of the film does take place, and also the characters travel. Which is again really, really interesting, and particularly at Nosferatu's castle, where it does appear completely abandoned and completely desolate, and it is very, very gorgeous and almost haunting, as something you can tell like something is just completely off of it already. Like, yes, even from the set design, even to its cinematography, which is extremely beautiful. Particularly that one shot where you definitely would have seen that trailer is when where Nosferatu's hand, or the shadow of it, is just lurking over the German town and just keeps going and going and keeps on going. Like, it just that effect is just really awe-inspiring, and also in the scene where the plague happens, where all the mice just go around the town, like how that was shot is just really somewhat of a daunting task to do. Like, apparently they actually had to use real rats as well. Hopefully not disease-ridden rats, but real rats as well. Like, his claim to do like a lot of practical effects, which is somewhat evident in this movie. But I feel like he may use CG, like example like Northman as well. But again, how they shot that scene, how they shot the entire sequence about the plague, how recapping that town, it's we'll just say it's really haunting as well. The costuming work in this movie is completely on point, as it does go into the like the 1830s, like the later period of that time, which is again the costuming work is absolutely gorgeous and really on point in this movie, as it not just only does a lot of the costuming work of the more modern folks of that town, but also the solicitors, the estate agents, the doctors, and first officers, like all their dress codes as well, and also their mourning gear as well. And also there was a very brief window, a very brief scene in that movie where the Thomas, or Nicholas Holt's character, does stop into an inn that's mostly populated by gypsies and also filled with peasants, which again, the costuming work is very, I'm not sure how culturally accurate it is, but it's definitely somewhat pleasing to see something a little bit more different to what we've seen already. And of course, we get to the costuming work of the Count Ulok, or Nosferatu, who is very eccentric and wears like a very large coat around him, which throughout his first encounter with Nosferatu, he pretty much is shrouded by this massive beefed up coat that he has around him. Then we only do see glimpses of him, and we essentially then we start to peel back more and more and more until by the end of that first encounter we have a really good idea of what he looks like, which again, kind of like what I said about the movie, it just peels back more and more and more about what makes the movie really uncomfortable. Like we're not certain what Nosferatu looks like, but the more we peel back, we just become more and more fearful about him. There's Bill Skarsgård as Count Ulog, or Nosferatu, who is completely unrecognizable in this role. Like, I think he looked more like Freddie Mercury than himself in this movie. Like, of course, he does look like Nosferatu, like the one from the 70s and the one from the 1920s, but seriously, like, I did not recognize him at all. Like, when I checked up the film's Wikipedia page, like, wait, that's him? Really? Like, he does give out like an incredible performance in this movie. Like he is just one of the most intimidating and just menacing and just a most prevalent character in this movie. Like, just something, you just know something's completely off about him, like the very moment you encounter him. Like, there's just something you just do not want to mess with him, even though you don't know what specifically he does to mess with people. Like, it's just something's completely off with him. Like, he just persists that throughout the entirety of that movie, that notion that he's just not the most likable, just one of the most repulsive characters in horror, both in classical and contemporary. And also Bill Skarsgård has a very interesting year to say. Like, he had Boy Kills World, which flew under a lot of people's radar, but it does look a lot of fun. Then there was the Crow remake, which everyone avoided like the plague. And of course, he now plays Nosferatu, which is a movie about a Dracula who brings on the plague. So, very ironic twist. The standout performances from all around the cast, like Willem Dafoe, who always does a great performances, and I think if I remember top of says this is his third collaboration with Robert Eggers. Emma Collins, who they give a really great performances, and also had a pretty good year with Deadpool Wolverine, as well as their performance as Princess Diana in The Crown. And of course there's Aaron Taylor Johnson, who's also had a really big year as well, particularly with the really fun movie The Fall Guy. And of course we have Coming 28 Years Later, which has a lot of anticipation for, and also he does give off a somewhat of a more reluctant and increasingly mean-spirited husband. And Lily Rose Depp, yes, the daughter of Johnny Depp, does give a incredible stand-up performances of Ellen Hunter in this movie, as she is just basically going through hell and back, then back to hell, then through it and out of it. Like, she's suffered through enough, and she's been through enough, and she goes through enough. Like, she's basically having gone through like an extremely tedious and laborious and torturous process, and being constantly under the spell of Nosferatu. And of course Nicholas Hoult as Thomas Hutter in this movie. he is definitely a driving force in this movie, and he does give out an incredible performance of this film as well. Bill Skarsgård is spellbinding in this movie. His nuanced acting, particularly in horror movies like he did previously in It, as for instance, like his performance is just oozing of just how repulsive and just how ugly and just how really cockroach-like Nosferatu is. Like the movie is just. Even though it's one of the most atmospheric horror movies out there, it definitely does thrive really well with Robert Eggers' image, as the movie cinematography is really gorgeous to look at. The production work and the costuming work is seriously excellent. The acting for a lot of the characters in this movie, as well as the actors in the movie, like Terry Johnson, Nicholas Hoult, Lily Depp Rose, and of course Bill Skarsgård. They were all absolutely brilliant in this movie, and the makeup work of Nosferatu pretty much transformed Bill Skarsgård from one of the biggest heartthrobs of the 2020s and 2010s to one of the grossest horror monsters that pretty much graced the cinema screens, regardless if it's the 1920s or the 1970s versions you are thinking of, but. For this version, it definitely leaves its own mark in horror lore and leaves its own mark within the lore of the Nosferatu and Count Ulog. So for Nosferatu, I am feeling a 9 out of 10. So, what do you think of Nosferatu? Let me know in the comments down below. Subscribe to my channel, like this video, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and Letterboxd, and Blue Sky. This is Elijah Wells, and bye!